we're going to do is we're going to kick it off with my two colleagues, Abid Chaudhry and Mike Boland, and they've kind of set up a little top 10 list of best practices in the local commerce universe. Gentlemen, come on up.
Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah, and give them a hand, come on.
Thanks, Charlie. So that video clip, of course, was from the movie The Internship. Some of you may have already seen that, and we wanted to start the day with a little bit of levity and personality, but also there were a lot of themes in that clip that are going to very much relate and we're going to circle back to in this presentation and throughout the next 2 days. And on another level, as I was sitting there watching it, another thing occurred to me is that you guys all know that when we give examples of local businesses, when kind of discussing different models and what's going to work, the business persona we always seem to use is plumbers. You guys all recognize that and see that happening all the time. And Joe the plumber, it's always the plumber. So I move that we start to use Sal's Pizza as the kind of generic example and the litmus test for discussing these types of models. So I'm Mike Boland, analyst with BI Kelsey. My colleague Abid Chaudhry. Say hi, Abid.
Good morning, folks.
So what we have planned for the next 20 minutes or so is to roll through some of the top trends that we're seeing in local as analysts, but not just trends. As Charlie mentioned, and to stay true to the theme of this conference of being actionable and tactical, we're going to relate each of these trends to some of the things that you should be doing and seeing and thinking about today. So we're going to get right into it. And to start off, we want to start at really kind of the top level. People talk about the 40,000-foot view. We've gone back even further than that to kind of a universe perspective. So Abid, tell us about the local commerce universe.
Sure. And again, good morning, folks. Abid Chaudhry. I'm a senior analyst as well as senior director of strategy with BI Kelsey. As Mike mentioned, one of the things that we've been trying to do in the last year and a half, 2 years, is try to think about how to establish a larger framework for thinking about the space that we're all working in. A lot of folks that are going to be attending this event, as well as in our past couple of events, have been newcomers to what we would normally associate to the local space. And with that, what we have tried to do is create a larger perspective. And what we've done is we've created this philosophy or this concept called the local commerce universe. Now, the local commerce universe is designed to be able to do something that is happening organically within the marketplace, which is move away from thinking about local as being just an advertising and marketing industry, and make it much more about thinking about share of wallet for the small business and the local business from the perspective of marketing, advertising, and the satellite of services that come along with it. And we've got partners as well as community members within our space here that have started to do this in a much more sort of aggressive way. Companies like Booker, who are starting to think about moving beyond the online scheduling and booking space into thinking about how to actually help a small business run their business, as well as Yelp, who recently went from just providing listings and reviews to being able to, with their purchase of SeedMe, start to allow for reservations to be created for a small business that necessarily might not be big enough for things like OpenTable. And we're going to be thinking more and more about how the local commerce universe is the connection between all the different parts of the world that we all work in. And so we wanted to set the foundation with that.
Mm-hmm. We see a lot of M&A activity to kind of get to that capability. Yelp's a great example of that. So as one of the core tenets of the local commerce universe is that additional kind of level of actionability in commerce and helping businesses on the back end and with things like transaction functionality, scheduling, as Abid mentioned, for Booker. That's also playing out on the consumer end. So users are coming to expect more immediacy. We see the millennial generation, which are growing in their buying empowerment. They're a generation that is very needy, is probably one way to put it, but they are very kind of immediacy driven. We have the on-demand economy, which is conditioning us all to expect things at the push of a button. So from all of that, really the kind of tactic and the takeaway is to start to utilize and pay attention to all the tools that are doing this. At a very kind of basic level, you can do this in Google AdWords with things like local extensions, allowing consumers to call a business directly from search results and search ads. We're seeing this outside of search in things like Pinterest and Instagram and Facebook. And even Snapchat, where this proliferation of buttons to buy or book or reserve service. So really the lesson is to start to really utilize these things, and it's even going beyond those venues into things like messaging apps, like Facebook Messenger. This is a concept we like to call conversational commerce. We have a session tomorrow at 11 o'clock that is about this topic. And really it's about ordering a pizza from Sal's at the push of a button from within a messaging thread. So really the point is to reduce these points of friction and do so in these venues where buying empowered millennials are increasingly spending all of their time. And a lot of the apps I just mentioned in the kind of messaging environments are certainly in that batch. And so despite, go ahead, Abid.
Well, no, I think it's interesting, with all the different new channels that are being utilized by folks, whether it's the millennial audience or whether it's just generally with all the different channels that have opened up, like messaging and content channels, that we have to always remember that search is still very, very important. And what's happened is that while we start to think about all the new sexy things that are taking place to capture audiences from, that search itself has evolved in significant ways. And so one of the things that we try to talk about, and especially as a lesson to think about going forward, is how do we think about search as part of our organization? And obviously, not obviously, maybe it is obvious at this point, we need to make sure that we think about it from a mobile-first perspective. Google has taken a very strict stance with thinking about mobile content and mobile web pages. And just as they were aggressive in thinking about how to best optimize websites that are on the desktop, they've been starting to do the same thing with mobile content as well, and they penalize for those websites and those mobile contents that necessarily don't fit into the best relevancy and optimization for a mobile-based search. And we have to remind ourselves that for Google itself, 50% of the searches that are taking place on Google are mobile-based, and 50% of those searches are actually local intent-based searches. And so it's really important as a lesson to think about how do we make sure that we're staying on top of the trends and the changes that are happening within the search world, and especially within Google. In the last couple of months, we've seen some significant changes in the way content is shown, including the accelerated mobile pages, the AMP or AMP pages, which allow for instant access to data straight from a search, as well as new types of ad units. You mentioned call extensions, but Google has also introduced new types of units like the direct call button or the direct call advertisement straight from a search engine into an actual call. And we expect that this is still going to be a significant part of the local commerce story, and so it's something to just keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Google, and speaking of search, Google has long been thought of as the kind of primary self-serve local marketing vehicle. Now, very kind of quickly and somewhat quietly, Facebook has actually taken over that crown. We've done the math, and Facebook has about 50 million local businesses that have Facebook pages. About 3 million of those pay for additional advertising, such as newsfeed ads, to drive traffic to those pages. According to BI Kelsey's Local Commerce Monitor survey data, among all of the types of kind of local marketing mediums for small businesses, Facebook pages is actually the top in terms of affinity and perceived ROI. So the lesson in all of this is pay close attention to what Facebook is doing. They're doing the marketplace a favor in operating at such a large scale and innovating so quickly and really being able to discern what this kind of new batch of local businesses wants. And we're talking about things similar to what I was mentioning earlier, highly actionable. Facebook pages that let you call a business or book service. I also mentioned the handoff from a Facebook page to Facebook Messenger to actually converse with a business. Now, one of the knee-jerk reactions to that, and which I agree with, is that a lot of local businesses aren't going to spend all their time kind of messaging and texting customers all day, especially the Sal's Pizzas of the world aren't going to do that. So that brings in AI and automation and what we call chatbots. Again, we're going to have a session tomorrow about that to really make that more of an attainable thing. So we're seeing a lot of that, a lot of the development being led by companies like Facebook, and it's important to provide these types of functionality to small businesses, but also watch closely what Facebook is doing. Again, I think they're leading the way in indicating what this new batch of small businesses, local businesses, multi-location businesses are doing and thinking and the types of things they want, which actually leads right into the next point, Abid.
Yeah, new batch of businesses is sort of like a way to think about the generational shift that's taking place. And it's not just the local business, the small business themselves, but also the management of multi-location or agencies or franchise-based businesses. And what we're finding is that when we think about millennials, we often sort of put them into a box as consumers that are changing the consumer behavior for the world of advertising and marketing. But we did the math, and the oldest millennials are actually inching towards 40 years old. And a lot of them are turning into entrepreneurs and are starting their own small businesses. And one of the things that we need to be cognizant about as folks that service and partner with small businesses in the industry is how do we best start to speak the new language that they're working with. And Mike talks about Facebook, but there's also other channels that are starting to be used and other types of marketing, content marketing, influencer-based marketing, that these audiences are starting to closely align to and move away from some of the traditional vocabulary like listings or presence as sort of the basis for a conversation. And that leads into sort of the lesson here, which is that as an organization, especially as a sales-based organization, it's really important to make sure that your reps and your pitch and your narratives speak to this new audience and can understand the context in which these younger millennial type based and younger and more suave based or sales and small businesses, are thinking. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have a crop of younger millennial type sales reps. And what it does mean though is that you have to start thinking about your sales training as well as the process by which you do your sales pitches as being something that's in context to who these new small business owners are, because it'll make a lot more sense for them, and it should allow for a closer connection between the solution that you're providing and the problem that these small businesses are having.
Yep, and you mentioned content marketing. So let's drill down on that. A lot of the trends we're seeing are pointing towards content marketing. One of those is that we're in an era where ad blockers have emerged. And that's largely a result of advertisers and publishers and ad agencies, frankly, getting lazy and kind of filling our digital experiences with really just kind of low quality, crappy banner advertising. So I think what we're seeing as a backlash to that is advertising that is more content-based. We also have millennials, of course. They're a generation that are known for their affinity for things that are genuine. They're known to not be trusting of traditional forms of advertising. So what we see happening is that content marketing is emerging in the wake of these kind of cultural factors. And in a lot of cases, we see this as being more genuine. Again, millennials appreciate things that are genuine. One reaction to that is that some forms of content marketing indeed are the opposite. When we look at kind of thinly veiled advertorials that are meant to kind of trick people to be organic content, that's not the content marketing we're talking about here. We're talking about helping local businesses tell their stories in kind of organic fashion. We're talking about blogs, Sal's Pizza talking about how he picks out his tomatoes. We're talking about how-to videos. The iPhone 6s now shoots 4K video, that production quality really coming into the hands of basically anyone. We're talking about things even as advanced as podcasts, which are really having a kind of a rebirth these days. So really the lesson is to provide local businesses the tools to be able to tell these stories. Look into some of the more emerging formats such as Snapchat stories, geofilters. These are all things we should all be familiar with. We're also seeing lots of different vertical strategies emerge. So with restaurants, Instagram makes a lot of sense and really shines. With retail, Pinterest makes a lot of sense for obvious reasons. And not only exploring these content marketing opportunities, but it's kind of the 1-2 punch of having solid content marketing, but also marketing automation to be able to take the incoming interest that results and cultivate those leads and mine them. Abid, tell us about MarTech. Speaking of,
right? And I'll be quick with this because what Mike mentioned sort of hits the head on here as well. But we talk about MarTech and ad tech and these buzzwords, but marketing technology itself has, in the last year, become a much more democratized, much more scalable and reachable type of solution for the world of local commerce and local and small businesses. And one of the things that we talk about as a lesson is to make sure that when you think about providing a marketing automation or a MarTech-based solution for your own customers, to also think about using those types of tools internally, because it will help you to start to think about how best to distribute and market to your potential customers. And I think that whether it's a buy, whether it's a build, or whether it's a partner-based decision, that when thinking about content marketing and automation processes, it's really important to start to think about how best to use internally as well as externally marketing automation solutions. I think you covered the rest of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and moving on, we're kind of getting low on time here, so I'll go through this quickly. A lot of the things we've talked about are very much at the kind of lower end of the adoption scale. Some of the less, technologies with lesser friction, but it also helps to kind of look at some of the more advanced technologies that will come down market and will democratize. And that includes things like beacons in retail and the Internet of Things. Beacons is kind of a branch of the Internet of Things, and I won't cover beacons now because I think that's a larger and separate topic. But the Internet of Things is interesting in that I always say that it doesn't get more hyper-local than all of the objects that surround us. And the connectivity of our homes, our cars, and our appliances really have a lot of interesting implications for things like home services, to be able to facilitate maintenance and the ways that buyer and seller of different home services will be facilitated when all of these kind of devices around us have these kind of sensors and diagnostic capabilities. A lot of great implications there. But bringing it back down to today's reality, the kind of tactic and the takeaway for today is start to experiment in some of these environments. And a good example there is what Talk Local and Home Advisor have both done by developing using the Amazon Echo software development kit, which is available to anyone to be present and to start to experiment with front-end applications in that environment. Now, the Amazon Echo, and what you may know as Alexa, is something that I believe is kind of a gateway drug to the Internet of Things. It's not a full-blown Internet of Things deployment, but it really starts to get people used to the idea of connected devices in their homes, not a screen, things you can talk to, and really kind of manipulate different things around your home or even in things you're transacting with in the outside world. So the point is, the Talk Locals and Home Advisors of the world that are experimenting with the Alexa SDK are really getting a lot of advantage in being an early mover in those environments, but also learning how consumers react in those environments, and really just expanding their touch points with the world by being in that kind of early stages of the Internet of Things. So we encourage you to kind of experiment there. Abid, moving on to sales transformation.
Yeah, what I'll do is just give a quick preview. I think sales transformation is going to be a big topic in this next couple of days, and I'll use this as an opportunity to plug. We've got a session tomorrow with my colleague Stacey Sedbrook, or our colleague Stacey Sedbrook, who's going to be doing a talk on the entire process of actually changing and transforming your organization to be able to do things like what we're talking about today, which is talk about new concepts in the world of emerging media and technology, as well as how to speak to the small business world itself. And there's 4 tips that we've set out that Stacey's going to go more into when it comes to thinking about the world of transformation. And the first one is changing the behavior or changing the people of your organization. It's got to be one or the other, and you're going to have to make some hard decisions when it comes to thinking about your sales organizations, as well as making sure that you're selling solutions and not products. And that's something that we've talked about often, but really, how does it get to the rubber meeting the road when it comes to thinking about this? As well as making sure that the marketing and sales world are aligned when it comes to the messaging, going all the way down to the actual conversation with the customer at the floor or the street or the telephone level. And then finally, making sure that you've provided your sales organization and your sales reps with the types of tools that are needed in order to differentiate. Often what we think about is that our organization is unique, but when a small business is talking to dozens of reps on a regular basis per month, you really need to make sure that you've not only provided a value proposition that differentiates, but also the types of tools that would make it so that you can provide your best face forward when it comes to the product and pitch that you're doing. And just a quick pitch for my own thing. Later on today at 5 p.m., we've actually got a small business pitch competition where we're going to be covering 3 different companies that are coming at the world of small businesses from a different angle and actually pitching directly to small businesses who will be standing right here. And just to see the different ways that people are doing it, and we've got a set of criteria that we've been using as best practices for pitching to small businesses that we'll be covering at that time as well.
And to reiterate, Stacey's session on sales transformation is tomorrow at
2:20.
2:20. Stacey, raise your hand. We all encourage you. That's going to be a highlight of the program. Really get down to some of those sales realities. So winding down here, we're going to end with a kind of future-looking view, which is to prepare for disruption. That's probably an obvious statement, but we see people fail at this all the time. So there are a lot of emerging technologies that are going to have a lot of applicability to local and local commerce and the local commerce universe. I mentioned artificial intelligence and chatbots. Those are very much emerging. We're going to have a session tomorrow on that. One thing I didn't mention yet is virtual reality and augmented reality, more so with augmented reality. There's a lot of great implications for local discovery and local commerce with the graphical overlays that can be in front of us when we are in kind of high intent mode, doing everything from looking at a restaurant to be able to see its health code ratings or its Yelp reviews, or looking at a house and being able to see the specs, all as these kind of geotagged graphical overlays to the world around us. It's kind of the unfulfilled and premature promise of Google Glass, all of those types of futuristic things, but they're going to be here before we know it. So really the lesson and the takeaway is to really start to think and vet and experiment with how these types of things either support your existing customer bases and advertisers and user bases, or how they could disrupt that. And it'll be here before we know it, and learn from the lessons of the past two kind of large consumer-based technology revolutions, where a lot of the people in this industry, and frankly maybe some of the people in this room, were parts of organizations that were too slow to adopt those revolutions and new kind of consumer behavior patterns, both with the commercial internet and the smartphone. These things are going to be here before we know it. My advice to you in terms of navigating the kind of organizational inertia, which is of course resident, especially with larger business companies and companies that are public that are forced to kind of think in short-term ways, is to build innovation labs. We often see that the successes in dealing with innovation and disruption, particularly among large organizations, happens when they can spin out innovation labs that are physically separated from some of the things that tend to be toxic to that innovation, such as cultural inertia, innovator's dilemma, these types of things. Usually the successes in these situations are a function of their distance from the mothership. And a few examples we've seen in local are Deseret Media in the newspaper world that is doing a great job in terms of separating both from a product perspective and from a product sales perspective, its digital and traditional assets. Another great one is YP, or I should say AT&T Interactive, which is the forebearer to what we now know as YP. It was an innovation lab within AT&T that was given its own kind of shared innovation air to breathe. And not only that, but again, the separation from the kind of some of the cultural setbacks that tend to sometimes be detrimental to that innovation. So we're going to end there with that kind of future-looking note. We hope you have a great conference. I want to thank Abid, and next we're going to call up to the stage Mitch Radcliffe, who's going to introduce our first keynote speaker, Stephen Johnson. So thank you. Have a great show.